Doesn't it? I'm here with the artist known as Keemo in his studio. Start, I guess, with a little bit of background. How long have you been doing this, and have you always primarily been a painter?
So I've been making art and interested in creativity just kind of in general for as long as I can remember. I mean, when I was young, I would draw football players and cars and cartoons, you know, those kinds of things. And then when I was around 15, 16 years old, I had a great art teacher, and I started to learn kind of that art can be something that isn't just representative of the things that we see. And I feel like it was a fortunate lesson to learn as a 15-year-old. And once I kind of got that idea that art could be something that's on the inside as opposed to what's on the outside necessarily, that was kind of the path that I started to carve for myself as a 15-year-old. And so I've been kind of doing some version or evolution of that ever since. And you know, it wasn't until I got older where I thought, this is what I'm going to do for a living. When I was younger, I wanted to pursue it, and that's where I think a certain amount of work ethic came along to keep producing and keep searching and keep creating. And but it wasn't until much later that I decided I'm going to turn this into what I'm going to do for my life. And I think generally it was more about making art fits better with my personal constitution, I guess, you know, as opposed to kind of leading a corporate lifestyle or those kinds of things. I feel like making art and being a creative person, whether it's painting or writing music or anything, it takes you into a different place in this world, and that's a place that I enjoy being. You know, we've had conversations about how people who are creatives tend to be by themselves a lot, you know, and you know, when I was young, in those 15, 16 years old ages, I really needed to be by myself to figure out kind of all of that crap that you're going through, you know, at that time. And little did I know that you go through your whole life. It's not just then, you know. So, you know, in the beginning, it really became a way to understand the things that were going on around me and the emotions that I had, and I think it's kind of been that ever since.
Were you always sort of like not solitary necessarily, but cool with being alone, and that that led to this, or doing this work made you solitary?
No, I think definitely I've always been kind of shy. I'm definitely on the introvert side of personalities for sure. So yeah, I think it's just kind of how my personality is, and so it just fits this very well. You know, it works really well that way.
Have you always, since age 15, have you always been doing these not really representational work, or did you used to do, like, was that just like that, or did you sort of ease into it?
It's always been this way. I've always been kind of interested in a couple things, and I think one is I'm interested in people. I'm interested in kind of what makes us unique. I'm interested in what makes us tick. You know, and those things are, to me, are on the inside. Those aren't necessarily things that are represented by my hat or my shirt or your watch or whatever. I feel like that there's things inside of us that we can try to capture. And so I kind of learned that. I kind of went down that path at a very young age of really kind of those two main pieces. And then, so I never, because that was kind of where my interest was and what I thought was important, I never really got interested in trying to do realistic representations of anything. I think there's a lot of artists out there that do that wonderfully, and it didn't fit with my own constitution. So I needed to follow, I think, how I felt on the inside. And I think everything that I do, even to this day, is trying to listen to that inner voice and try to listen and create in a way that works with me. Not try to think, it's, I guess one way to maybe think about it is focusing more on the creativity as opposed to focusing on the art. And by that I mean you have an idea of what you think art is, and so you work to accomplish that, and then you have an idea where maybe it's less about what you think art is, but more about discovering what creativity is. And then the art is just the sum of how you got there. But going back to your initial question of, is this something that I've always done? Yes, I've always done these kind of figures that are abstract, but within that is all of the colors, all of the symbols, all of the lines have very much a personal meaning to me that have kind of developed over the years. So certain colors maybe have a certain emotional kind of feeling to me, or they represent something in my past or in my life now that have meaning. So I'll often, maybe one of the examples is the blue, like in this painting behind us. That's the same exact blue that I've used for the last 20 years. Same brand, same color. And it was a blue that I started using after kind of a hard point in life when I was in my early 30s. And I guess my late 20s. And it kind of represented something that was a very hard, I was using it to represent tears at that time. And then, but as I kind of came over that personal feeling that color was associated and started to come out of this kind of negative space and moved into more of a positive space, I kind of transformed that blue into meaning something that was more about positivity and thinking about it more in terms of like the sky and possibilities as opposed to tears and sadness. And so I always carry that, or I attach that to that color blue. And so, I think if you're looking at the painting from the outside, I think sometimes it's easy to say, well, the color choice was made. Like if you're coming at it from the art point of view, you think, oh, I'm using this color with this color for the reason because they work together, let's say. But that's not it at all. I'm using this color and this color because kind of the emotional feeling during that part of the creation process, those two things were most present, I guess, inside. And so, it's quite, yeah, so I don't know if that answers your question completely or not, yeah. But I guess, so anyway, so everything you see now is really just, in my mind, just this evolution or following this path that I'm going down to try to actually just figure out what creativity is and what does my creativity mean to me. And hopefully, when I get to the end of this life, I have some kind of answers, I hope.
You don't have the answers yet?
I don't have the answers yet, I feel like I started like the first third of my art life was kind of like, I knew I had something to say. I just didn't know what it was, and I feel like the second third of my art life was figuring out how am I going to say that? What is people might say it's like a style. It's a language, and to me it's kind of like a language. Like, how am I going to say it? And I kind of feel like I'm at this point right now where I need to make that next transition to, okay, now that I kind of know how to say, maybe the language, now I think I need to figure out what do I want to really say, as an artist or as a creative person.
And you're still in the process of figuring out what what is?
Yeah, I think I have a lot of general ideas about maybe how I feel about life or how I feel about things, and that isn't to say that like I haven't been saying anything. That's not it at all. I think I've been saying. I think there's a tendency as a painter to kind of look inward all the time, because you're sitting there alone, you're sitting in front of that canvas, And so it's real easy to get very introspective and think that the world kind of exists in this studio, on this canvas, in this head, you know? And I think I kind of want to make the turn, or I'm ready to make the turn to say something that's outside of this head, if you will, you know? Maybe to like part of a larger dialogue.
Like you're going to all of a sudden be doing highly political work like that?
I don't know that I'll go that way. I don't know that I'll go that way. I really have a disdain for politics in general, not just at the government level, but.
Back to your earlier statement, I know you said what the blue has meant to you, but is that something that to people who are buying your work, like, do you tell them that, or do you just let them interpret however they want to?
I just let them interpret however they want to. I don't know that why I do everything is not necessarily important to what the outcome is to everyone else. You know, every time you sit down to make anything, you have to make a decision on what you're going to do. And as a creative person, your job is to figure out, why am I choosing this color? Why am I doing this line? You know, why is my canvas this size? You define all of the rules. And what I learned, I guess, when I was young was, if art is the thing where I get to define all the rules, I need to take some time and think about those rules, and I can define them any way that I want. So, you know, instead of saying, oh, I'm going to use this color blue because other artists I like use that color, or my art is going to look this way because other artists, or art that's already been defined has said this is what it is. And you can't sustain a long creative life if that's where you're pulling your sources from. And so I've always felt that I'm going to choose my color in the way that is most important to me, because I'm the one that has to live with this process, and it's coming from me. You know, you don't necessarily ask a chef. You know, I mean, while on one hand, if you're a chef, there's scientific reasons why you might use salt or lemon or things like that. But at the end of the day, you know, a chef is going to ultimately dig a little deeper. Maybe it's things from when they were a child, you know, or it's things that during their travels they picked something up, and that found its way into a new dish.
I think you just quoted the plot to Ratatouille.
Oh, I did? Okay. I didn't see it, so I didn't see it.
I've only seen it 1,000 times.
Okay, so all right, well, good. I'll have to contact them for my screenwriting credit, I guess. So ultimately, yeah, so I mean, I know it's a little bit of a tangent there, but so I do that with everything. I mean, and sometimes like, you know, like I've texted my daughter and said, you know, what color makes you think of summer? And she would text me back a color, and that's the color I would use next. You know, things like that. You know, also allowing for, you know, ways to get myself out of my own way. You know.
Yeah.
You know, I will
How old is your daughter now?
She's going to be 30, so she's 29. She'll be 30 in a month. Yeah.
If you were doing that when she was a kid, asking her questions like that, like, whatever piece that you made felt like bigger to her because somehow she was part of the process, and, oh, look, Dad, that's the color I said to Dad. Cool.
Yeah.
When she was younger, did she hang out with you while you painted, or did that, back to the solitude thing, was that something you could do with kids around on the floor, or not?
Yeah. You know, when she was young, I had a full-time job as well, but I was still making art in the evenings, or and it's not even maybe just making art, but it's playing guitar, it's kind of doing other kind of creative things in your daily life, right? But when she was young, my wife is very creative as well, and so we would spend time, with the paints out in the backyard, or drawing, or doing things with wood and nailing them together in weird ways and painting them and those kinds of things. But as far as kind of like the work part of it, when she was young, I had a full-time job, so I was working, and then so a lot of my kind of solitary, really get down and focus time was in the evenings after everybody went to bed. Because when you have a full-time job, you've got all these other responsibilities, so you're getting home at 6 o'clock, and then you have you'll have dinner, you have family time, or you have all those things that you got to take care of. So I generally wasn't getting started kind of working until maybe 9, 10 o'clock at night, and then I would work until 2 o'clock. Which is, it's oddly enough, I still kind of have that same practice where I find that the evenings are the time when I like to be kind of quiet out here in the studio working. So I've been trying to get it to where I can move that to the AM. You were saying earlier how your kind of creative time is in the morning, and I'm kind of the opposite. Every time I try to move it to the morning, I just become very, very much less productive.
Yeah.
That's my time to like do emails and answer messages and kind of all of that stuff.
When you were telling the story about pounding nails and stuff with your daughter, it reminded me of, I guess probably like 10 years ago, I became the recipient of like 36 mannequin heads from the dumpster behind a hair salon training facility.
That's a pretty good score.
Yeah, and so I made all kinds of stuff out of that, and especially on a nice day like today, one of the things that I invited all the kids, but I think only my son wasn't interested, but we would see what happens if you take a blowtorch to the mannequin head. What's inside there, or see if we can melt these two together like they're kissing or something like that, and then he got one or two of his own to do what he wanted to with, and his mannequin head, which has like big spike nails all over it, is still on our living room wall to this day, and it's super creepy, but I think that was a lot of fun, and I'm sure if people were walking by our backyard as we were doing it, somewhat questionable, but that will always be a core memory that I have.
But I think it's an essential point to kind of what art is, like at its simplest. That story and the result is an honest, truthful, authentic, creative experience. And it always kind of me like to judge it based on the finished thing that people are walking by and making that assessment it's not that relevant to what happened, with you and your life and that experience.
Well, and that also makes me think about the process that one of the best things about kids is that they generally, to super oversimplify it, aren't concerned with the results. It's all just a investigation. To me anyway, that has to be how you live your life, and especially in the creative part of your life, but that stuff bleeds all over. But if you already had the end result in mind, then what was the point of everything leading up to that? And that I also thought of that when you were talking about telling people why you do certain things and why not to tell them that. And I've always thought that sometimes you kind of wish that people got what you were going for a little bit better, but if you have to explain, well, this is what this means, and not even if you have to, if you just do explain the thing that you're trying to explain is completely unnecessary, because you just illustrated that we could just have a conversation and I could tell you a thought that I had, done. There was no need for this physical piece or this musical piece or any of that. And I just stole the entire experience from you by telling you what you should think about it. It looks like you do a good job of reminding yourself to get out of your own way. As I'm looking at the paintings, and I've seen online, like some of your time lapse and all that stuff. It looks like you, on any one of these paintings, there's like 6 paintings, 5 of which you completely obliterated and got rid of. And I want you to talk a little bit about that and about the act, conscious or not, of not being so precious about your choices and being willing to destroy something that probably was good enough to keep, and it's gone forever now under layers of additional paint.
It's funny because that is one of the things that I get comments about destroying pieces of art by continuing to add or cover up things. I guess if I was to, I'm trying to think of a way to say it simply. I really want to discover who I am, what I'm about, and what we're all doing here, and what is art, how does it fit into things. And these are that's kind of like, I guess, my base spot that I'm working from. And the main part of my creativity or my creative process is to discover. And I feel like if I set out to a goal and I don't reach that goal, then on one hand I may have failed, or it's not going to meet some expectation that I have. And what I really enjoy about the creative process is if you can let all that stuff go, or those rules that that the art world has defined, and just make your own rules and follow your own path, then your chances of discovering something that's unique to yourself is going to be better. I mean, it's going to increase. And when I guess I look at the process of making art very much like a conversation. So just very much like this conversation, we didn't have a plan set out. We're not reading a script. You are asking me a question, I'm responding, and then you're responding to that, and I'm responding. And I hope during this conversation, we are both free to change our minds, maybe be open to something new, learn something about each other or ourselves. And in making a painting or any piece of art is exactly that same thing to me. So, I don't generally draw out a piece before I start. You look at a lot of artists, and they will draw out their outline and color it in like a coloring book. I can't work that way. It's not, and I shouldn't say I can't, but that's not why I do it. And so when I look at it, when I put a color down, I might put that blue down that we talked about, and the phone might ring, and I take the call, and I'm talking to somebody, and when I'm done, I might feel a little bit differently, and I look back, and that painting is saying something back to me at that point. And it might mean cover me all up, or gosh, what you just put down, it just doesn't feel right, or the balance isn't there, or or whatever that might be. But there's something in that conversation between me and the canvas that says, I'm going to say this next. I'm going to say this next. And then the canvas kind of talks back to me, and I really feel like there's a lot of back and forth. And how that gets perceived is, that you've put something down in which looks like it's a finished piece of art by whatever standards, whoever's defined that at this point this could be a finished piece of art. But to me and the person who's making it, it's not. It's just, it might as well be blank on a certain level, But with that said, that is one of the more difficult things, and maybe all creatives feel this way, is that what is that point at which you stop and you say, okay, that is finished.
Yeah, it seems like that would be the challenge with the way that you work, is that you could work on one painting for 20 years.
Yeah, yeah.
So there has to be a point where you just are like,
yeah,
I have to walk away from this.
Yeah, and so that is something that you have to learn how, I guess I shouldn't say you learn, but maybe you get to that point where it's like, okay, this conversation's over. Like I think we've gone as far down this road as we're going to go. And, but then, then there's the reality of this is how I feed and clothe myself, and this is how I make my living. So I do, at the end of the day, have to have something that I can sell, as well. It's funny you bring up the idea that you can keep going. So I'm actually working on a painting, and it's the one that's in that far back corner. That painting is the black one there with the. That's actually a painting that I am going to work on for the rest of my life.
Oh.
I'm not going to finish it, and it's not going to end until I'm dead. And then at that point, probably my daughter will get it or something. But to simply explore that idea and allow myself the opportunity to not have a finishing point, to not, to completely just dive into that discovery process, and not to be, because I think when you bring a painting to a close, or any piece of art to a close, you're kind of you're defining that moment in time. And as much as we've been talking about the process, and where that for myself is the important part, that project just allows me to kind of go on forever, which kind of funnily, or not funnily, that's not a word, but kind of in a funny way, for a while, really kind of destroyed me as a painter, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I love this not having to bring anything to a close. I don't mean to say like that's a bad way, and I hope I'm not implying that like, if you make art that way, that somehow is not art or something like that. I just have found that for my own existence, I can't. It's not something, following that route doesn't allow me to explore me, I guess, as well.
Well, I think I was just saying that when you said that, it reminded me that whatever we're talking about, my process is pretty close, it sounds like, to yours, which is basically I've got this block of time, I'm going to do something with it, and just jump in and what's the word? Look as you leap, I think is the.
Okay, yeah.
But also just from a process standpoint, it does look like it looks like a mix of working really fast, and I don't mean necessarily like physically fast, but faster than your brain, making sure you're always a few steps ahead of your brain, because your brain's going to think it and you got to feel it.
Right.
But then also I don't know if this is a going back in or if it's simultaneous, but also then like meticulous little details where you're using a little tiny brush, which means you got to slow way down to use those brushes.
They need to quantify the speed of creativity somehow. We need some physicist somewhere to define that speed.
Well, that's what I like about just one, the more you describe it, but also just intuiting from looking at is that a lot of stuff that at least I, as a consumer, that's a bad word, but as a consumer of art, one thing that I usually don't know ahead of time but learn after the fact is that a lot of my favorite stuff was really done haphazardly like that, and there are mistakes in it, and nobody really knew what they were doing when they started it, but it turned into something. And the ones right now, I'm only thinking of musical examples, but I'm a kid that grew up in the 90s, and I was a metalhead. I loved Metallica, and
it's the best concert I ever went to.
And then they, I saw them, was it in 86 or 87? When they were like It was the Monsters of Rock. So
Oh, yeah.
I think the headliners were like Van Halen and the Scorpions, and these punky little kids who played like second or third in the lineup. Just, I don't know why anybody followed them because they blew everyone away. But anyway, their studio albums are great. But then they came out with that Garage Days cover record, and like sonically, I thought that was the best one they did because they didn't care. They're just like, well, let's do this Motorhead song or whatever, and they just did it. And then after that, then subsequent studio albums came out, and I was like, oh man, you guys spent too much time thinking about this.
Yeah.
You were too precious about it, and it sort of lost something.
Well,
I mean, I still listen to it, but.
And kind of going back to what you're saying, though, about getting out of your own way and just letting yourself pursue the things that interest you and pursue the things where your heart lies. And ultimately, and I guess I've always had this firm hope, maybe I like to say it's a belief, but it's more a hope maybe, that if you kind of allow yourself to get out of the way and genuinely put yourself into something and come from a place that's genuinely you, then my hope is that what the outcome is something that's genuine, authentic, that people can connect with. And it's okay to connect with things that you don't understand. We want to try to understand everything, like why, what makes this painting good or whatever. I think we don't necessarily need to be able to articulate why we like something always, and art is no different for I guess for me at least, but my hope is that if you can, I hate to phrase it this way, but if you can put something genuine out into the cosmos, that it can have some kind of positive impact, I guess maybe is a way to.
I think you're right.
And a positive impact in a way that maybe you can't articulate. But at least you can have some fun trying to articulate it, I guess.
As a photographer and video guy, what I noticed over the years, even before I started doing video, was that I would go on these location shoots and I had to meet people that I've never met before in my life, and 2 days from now will never see again in my life. And they're not professional actors. And it's not that I had to, but I would make a genuine, authentic connection with them, and by the time I left 2 days later, it felt like we'd known each other our whole lives. And on the rare occasions that didn't happen, maybe someone kept their walls up or whatever, or maybe I was having a bad weekend, or who knows why, but the connection just didn't happen. Every single time, I could see it in the photos. It's not that you could see it when it did happen, it's that you can see it when it didn't happen. Being all in is really what makes or breaks whatever it is that you're doing. And if any way you are being tentative about it, everyone will know.
Right.
They might not know that they know, but they know.
And I find too, like if I'm tentative about when I'm working on something, and I'm feeling tentative about that particular piece, what I'm generally probably doing is being concerned with how it's going to be perceived when it's done. And it took me a long time to just to truly not care what other people, how other people interpret it. It took, I can even remember clearly, I had a show at the old Richard App Gallery here, and I'm just kind of standing there off by myself, and this couple walks by a painting that was up, and the lady and the woman says, oh, I hate this stuff. It's too busy, for me. And they kept on walking. I was like, okay, that's great. The next couple that came by stopped and said, wow. And I didn't know either of them. I didn't, but you just can't make something for other people. You know, you're not making it, I guess for me, like, I'm not making it for the couple that walked by, and I'm not making it for the couple that stopped. But there's enough people in this world that, and there's enough things out there to enjoy that make what you, I guess I kind of just now simply subscribe to, if I make what I enjoy, there's going to be somebody out there that will find some connection with it, you know, and to not, because I often find, like, if I'm stuck in a painting, I kind of find myself going to thinking of that person, that couple that walked by, you know, and that's a dangerous place to be at as a creative person, is to think about that person that walked by. On the flip side, it's also very dangerous to think about the person that stopped. Because if you make something for the person that walked by, you're not really being genuine to yourself. But if you make something for the person who stopped, then you're
it's just the flip side of the same coin.
It's the same coin, yeah. Now you're just limiting yourself from any kind of further creative growth.
Well, and you just described the entry point to shrinking yourself over and over and over again to make someone else comfortable.
Yeah.
The result of that is still the same as if you hadn't shrunk like, if the risk was rejection, it ends up you didn't save yourself from that. You just shriveled up in the meantime.
Right.
And especially in creative output, I'm guilty of that. I've done
yeah,
that.
we all are.
I mean, and you know, and as a dad, which means you're constantly getting your hypocritical ass handed to you for not acting in the way that you claim to preach. You know, everyone cares a little bit about what people think of them. And I had a clarifying conversation with one of my kids recently because they forgot the next part of what I always said to them, which was, what they heard was, the right way to be is not to care at all what anyone thinks. And so they spent their whole life, I guess, feeling a little bit like, man, I'm not pulling it off. I'm not pulling it off because I do kind of care. Yeah. And I was like, no, you were young, but what I actually said was, everyone cares how they will be perceived. You just can't, you can't let that make the decision for how to proceed next. If you think it's a good idea, you should just do it. Because someone's not going to like it.
Right.
And, you know, and that was before I realized, you know, the shrinking thing. But in artistic output, that would be just devastating. You'd end up doing the same. If you were doing that, you would do the same painting over and over and over again because that one painting sold. So you just keep doing it.
Yeah, and there's been points where I've consciously stopped doing certain pieces or styles or types of work, or I've changed my path because I could feel myself kind of getting stuck there because that's what was selling. And I mean, that's one of the difficult things of being a self-employed artist, is that line between commerce and creativity. And how do you walk that line and still sleep okay at night with yourself, you know? Here we're lucky enough to have some peacocks that wander around our neighborhood, and they often come over here, and they'll look through the door there and stuff, and I love it. Awesome. And so there was a time there where because I generally paint what's on my mind or what I'm interested in, so I started painting the peacocks because they're right there, you know, but the peacocks, and then the peacock paintings were selling. Like, I'd post them and they would sell. I'd post them and they'd sell. And it would have been very easy, I think, to say, okay, well, I'm just going to continue down this road, and this is what I'm. But I had that's that line between commerce and creativity, and where are you on that line? And I had to say to myself, if I'm going to continue I mean, if I stay and paint peacocks for the next year, 2 years, 3 years, I might as well it's a factory job. I've just turned my studio into a factory, and that isn't why I wake up in the morning. I'd much rather wake up in the morning and not know what I'm going to be doing on this canvas today, as opposed to knowing, all right, I'm just going to churn out another peacock. And that isn't to lessen like the peacock paintings themselves. I love that there's only a handful of them out there, and the people who have them really love them, and and it's time to move on. But that is a difficult being, that is a difficult spot, is allowing yourself to transition into different things, or different, at that point, like the peacock paintings, they were on wood with a black silhouette, and then I was painting in the black silhouette, which is quite different than something like that you see here. But to allow yourself that freedom, at the risk of losing your income,
Yeah.
But I'm very thankful and for all the people that continue to follow my work and be supportive of it and show interest in it. That they are in that, they seem to be on that same kind of wavelength of like, let's explore, and instead of holding up to the pressures to say you should define your style, and then you stick with that. I see that all the time, where, as an artist, I think there's a certain amount of pressure to figure out what's your style, and then you run with it, and it's kind of like when a band, has a really good first album, and then they go out and they do that, second album, which they're really exploring their instruments and all that, and it's a flop, or whatever, but they took that creative leap, and as an artist, I want to always give myself the freedom to explore that without being driven by that commerce side.
Over the years, I noticed that and it's really not about having down days or whatever, but if I just committed to, I'm going to make something, and oftentimes it has no commercial value, has nothing to do with photography probably. When I did that, then all of a sudden, like, the commercial work would out of nowhere and I didn't tell anyone I was doing that. So I guess maybe I believe in the law of attraction to a certain extent, because that just kept happening over and over again. And when I said, okay, I'm a commercial photographer, I have to make money at commercial photography, so that's all I'm going to do, then I'm just sitting here looking at the door wondering why no one's coming. The less I cared about that, the more I didn't have to worry about the money part of it. And the reason I bring that up is in what you were just talking about. It sounds like just here within your practice, you're kind of the same. Like, I'm just going to make stuff every day, and it doesn't matter. Come along if you want, or not. I don't care. But do you do other things? Because like for me, there's the photography part, there's the video part, making music, writing songs, recording music, painting, basically everything. Do you do other things to sort of, so you're not firing all the same circuits all the time, or? Yeah, definitely. Yeah, while I'm mainly known, I think, for being a painter, that's where I've spent most of my time, let's say the last decade. I'm always working on other things as well. I play guitar. I love design and art in general. I do a lot of kind of paper arts, where work, might be working out in the yard, or it might be, working on a large sculpture outside. I really love writing. There was a time where I didn't know if I wanted to be a writer or a painter or an artist, and I realized I could kind of So you picked all the solitary pursuits.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So, but I really love writing as well. I love the dying art of poetry. You know, I love writing in a way. I approach writing the same way that I do painting, and I approach playing music the same way that I do painting. I don't necessarily try to have a different. I try to almost have the same process, I think, or at least the approach towards all the different creative things. And I enjoy photography as well, not to any kind of commercial level or anything. But I will say that I think in general I just have kind of a openness to exploring different ways of capturing things and displaying things, and so you know, I look at for quite a while I would separate kind of the creative process, the art creation process, from the business side of it. And what I've learned is that I really, like, if I need to make a video, I enjoy making the time-lapse video, or the audio to my time lapses are generally audio that I put together. You know, I didn't just go grab whatever's the trending song and slap it on there in hopes to get views. You know, I'll assemble it, you know, together, and so it becomes the whole. Each step of it becomes its own kind of creative process. You know, and so yeah. So I don't know if that answers your question, but just generally being open to exploring a new creative idea.
Does that extend outside of art? Like, do you have the same approach to life?
I think generally, yeah, because, you know, I think my art is just simply reflecting, my approach to art and creativity is just simply reflecting my approach to existence and life, absolutely, yeah.
That's a really good soundbite statement to end this on.
Well, I appreciate you asking me to do this. Like I said, I don't do this type of thing very often, but I was looking forward to this conversation and getting to meet you.